Hello everyone, welcome to the DevOps Bootcamp. This is Lakshit Pant from Azure Developer Community, and we have today. This is the day 4 of DevOps Bootcamp, and today we have our expert speaker Naveen Kumar sir, and we will be talking about pipeline as a code with YAML and Azure DevOps, and we'll be getting some incredible insights from Naveen sir. So far, we have covered multiple topics like Azure repos. We have covered basic introduction to DevOps. We have already covered. This is going to be day 3 of uh, DevOps Bootcamp. So, talking about Naveen sir's expertise, he's a technical advisor, site reliability engineer, incredible experience with GitOps and Kubernetes and evangelist. So, his experience is amazing. That will help you guys to understand how you can build the YAML pipelines in Microsoft Azure DevOps. So, not wasting much more time, I'll quickly pass on the stage to Naveen sir. So, over to you, sir.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, I'll actually walk you through how you could actually write pipeline as code in Azure DevOps using YAML. So we'll first understand. We'll cover a couple of topics today, which includes introduction to Azure pipelines. How do you set up? What's the difference between build and release pipelines? Some of the core components of pipelines, and some of the different kind of techniques that you could use in pipelines, and there'll be a lot many things to look at. So in case if you are actually going to work on it, I am actually creating a repo and a project from the scratch, and I'll be doing everything so that you would know you could also follow the same when you're actually doing it. I'm going to stick this in the chat for everyone. um, so later we'll update the um, repo as well. Sorry if it is, I'm not sure if this will be shared to them when it is being streamed. Uh, Likit, can you please help me with that? So here is the repo. It is azure dev.azure.com/nksp slash
Yes, sir, I
edu
have
dash.
already shared. Yeah, I
Okay,
have
thank you.
shared it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be creating pipelines uh, outright in the Azure DevOps itself. Basically, Azure DevOps is somewhat similar to your Jenkins. In fact, you will be writing pipeline as code. In Jenkins, you will use Groovy script, whereas in Azure DevOps, you'll use the YAML structure to write the pipeline. So, without further ado, let's go through the uh, key concepts, and then we'll start with some starter pipelines. You could also follow the same what I'm doing. Actually, you can copy the pipelines from the repo which I just shared with you all. Okay. So basically, Azure Pipeline helps you to automate every steps of your application lifecycle, which includes build, test, deployment. So it allows you to set up integration testings or any other checks that you would like to do before your application is being deployed to an environment. In fact, even you could actually set up the environment deployment using Azure pipelines. So it basically you can consider any command that you would run manually could be achieved through the Azure DevOps automatically. So pipelines is actually basically a configuration file of how a set of tasks to be executed based on certain conditions, certain checks, etc. So each of these, each task of this series of tasks is basically you could execute them manually as well. It includes an instruction on how it all these tasks has to actually be get executed. So one run of a pipeline, we call it as build, and you'll be able to see that shortly when I run a build, multiple builds or one or two builds. Um, a pipeline build is named by its Git commit. It's basically it you could uniquely identify them using commit ID or even the pipeline ID or the pipeline number. Um, so pipeline names should be unique. You should not have any spaces or special characters because else the path will get modified. You could actually connect to pipeline. You can have your pipeline connect to any Git like repositories, or even any other source code repositories to check out the code and use them. Or even you could write your pipeline in a separate repository, say GitHub, and you can have that checked out and run the pipeline. Next, so the best practice is actually, one important thing I want to cover is build versus release pipeline. So build pipeline is basically creates the artifact. It's like a shippable code that is being compiled and be ready to deploy. Whereas release pipeline is meant for deploying the artifacts. The best practice is that you separate build and release pipeline into two different build process and release process into two separate uh, pipelines, so that you could actually handle it effectively. But again, it is no basically DevOps is more of a culture rather than process or procedure. So it depends on how your team is and how often you are doing the deployment, or how fast you are doing the deployment. You could combine both of them together as well. It's totally possible. There is no hardened rule that you have to have separate pipeline. It's your call. um, so the pipeline architecture, basically, in order to run a pipeline, you need couple of things. One is the software or the tools that is required, and certain directories and required permissions to take care of run some commands or access some resources, etc. So the pipeline server or the Azure pipeline server architecture is basically, it gives you an UI, and also manages the queues and jobs, and distributes the jobs to the agent. So agent is where you will be running the application, which has the software directories and the permissions to run your build job or the pipeline tasks. And also Azure pipeline server gives you a API interface in case you want to access them programmatically or a scripted way. um, so Azure DevOps pipeline architecture also includes a key component called as agents. So the agent actually is where you will run all the set of tasks that you would be running. For example, if it is a build, test, and deploy, so you could actually have one agent running build and another agent running your test, and deploy could be done from the another agent, or it could be combination. It could be only one agent doing taking care of all of them. It's totally possible. You might be wondering, why do we have to do this? Because the tools that we use could be different in I mean, there will be a different requirement for each of them. For example, in order to run test, you might need some test suite, and in order to run build, you may have a requirement to build your application in different environments or different chipsets like AMD or ARM chipsets. So in such cases, you could actually handpick an agent and get them executed. So build output is basically an output of your instruction, which is being, or the task that is being executed. It basically shows the logs or the errors and successes of each steps or tasks, and it will be the primary troubleshooting tool for looking at the how the build has executed. So what is the result of it, etc. So this becomes a de facto tool to look at. In fact, there is two different kind of agents: Microsoft hosted agent and self-hosted agent. When you have a Microsoft hosted agent, it's basically the agent which is managed by Microsoft will be just consuming it. There you would not have access to go and look and get inside that specific agent boxes. So you have to have troubleshoot that through this build output itself. So so pipeline, say cd as code or pipeline as code, is basically a structured scripted instruction on how this pipeline should execute. It's basically YAML, and indentation is very important and white space sensitive. And it allows the agile methodology because you're storing this pipeline as code in your repo, so that every change that is being made, it can be reviewed by someone before it get merged. And also it can be version controlled so that you could fall back if needed. So azure-pipeline.yml is the default file name, not necessarily be that your um, file should be in this specific name. It can use conditional logic on how it has to execute, when it has to execute, etc. And as I said, it can be stored in source control such as GitHub or Azure Repo, etc. And it will help you to collaborative, or it can be versioned and also shareable with others if required. And so typically this will be shared along with your code, where you have written your application, developed. You will have the source code, right? Along with that, you will write the pipeline as code, typically be in a specific directory or maybe in the root directory. So here is a simple example of pipeline. So you have a trigger which says that when this pipeline should run automatically. So it basically means every time I make a commit to master branch, it will actually trigger the pipeline. And I'm saying that, okay, wait, in pool, I'm defining how this specific, where this specific build has to execute on which machine. And I'm explicitly saying that, it should run on Ubuntu 2004 machine. And here, if you can see that I'm using VM image, basically it implies I'm going to run this on a Microsoft hosted agent. If I'm using VM name, that means I'm specifically on the agent pool name. Then I will be asking the Azure DevOps to run this in a self-hosted agent where I actually have integrated with the Azure DevOps portal. Um, so here you might see if you have already worked on Azure DevOps, you'll have something called as stages and jobs. In case if you don't have more than one stage or job, you can straight away jump into steps and set up the set of instructions. And each instruction or the task that you would want to do is actually an array object. So basically you have to have a hyphen followed by a space, and then you are kind of defining what you would like to run, like a script block or a task block, etc. So more about YAML is that you'll use hash for commenting single line. Unfortunately, they don't have any multi-line comments, so you have to use multiple hashes, in multiple lines. Then you could use display name. It's basically a key value that you would be using like any other YAML document. So display name is meant to showcase what should be the name of the task that you are executing. In case you are running multiple shell scripts or the scripts, then you will use the display name to distinguish them. Uh, See, YAML is itself is more or less like a programming language, so it has certain capabilities of looping, if conditions, etc. These is supported in Azure DevOps, but not all of them. So you have to be careful when you're using it. Here is where I have an approach: see it to believe it. Try and test it. If it works, well and good. If not, no. There are many YAML techniques which is not documented in Azure DevOps documentation, would work, but not everything would work. What is the YAML property or the programming techniques? So let's look at a simple YAML project. So I'm going to my Azure DevOps. So pipelines is where I'll be, pipeline is a section. You have multiple sub properties or categories here. Consider this whole pipeline section that you're seeing is nothing but your Jenkins, if you have already used Jenkins. So the pipeline section is basically is meant for running any pipeline jobs or running CI/CDs or the build pipelines or release pipelines, etc. So let me go ahead and create a simple pipeline. Oh gosh, okay. So it's taking a while. Okay, so I'm going to handpick the source code as Git because I want to store everything in this specific repo which I shared with you all. So it is going
Sir,
to list that repo for me.
hello.
And
Hello, sir. Am I
yes,
audible? Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you between. It
yes,
would be better if you could just maximize the screen a little bit. Increase the resolution of screen.
I mean, are you not able to see the whole screen, or?
It's the whole screen is visible. It is very
I
small
see.
to
Okay.
yeah,
Is there any
that's
way to do that? I'm sharing the whole screen actually.
no. You can just
Um,
press control plus option. Control
Just
plus.
a moment. I will try to.
Sir, in the
Um,
your entire screen is visible, but the size is very small. That's why we
so let
just go.
yeah, yeah. Just a moment. Let me reshare my screen once again.
Sure, sir. Okay, maybe sounds like expert speaker is facing some issues. So let's wait for him to join. Till then, I have already shared the attendance form in the comment section. Please fill this form for your certificates. This is mandatory for all the Anurag folks, Anurag University folks. So please, so I'm sorry, GCET folks. So please feel free to submit this. Yes, sir. Yeah, sir, is it?
Sorry, I had
No
some
issues.
hiccup. My bad.
No
Apologies on
issues.
that, guys. I'm going to share my screen once again. So
Sure,
I'll
sir.
have a single screen now. So hopefully this should fix it. Yeah. So I'm on
No,
my
no,
single
sir.
screen.
The double screen is also fine. It's just that the resolution is little bit small. If you will
Sure,
go
sure.
to India, yes.
Yeah. Is it visible now?
Can you
You
just
see any
right click here?
challenges?
Okay, sir, can you please right click here? Right click. Yeah, there is this. Okay, yeah. Here is the resolution option. Okay, it's not coming here.
You mean to say in my desktop?
Yes. No, 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 sir. Can you open the Azure portal again? It's fine. Azure portal.
Oh, you mean to say you want to zoom in? Okay.
Yes, sir. Zoom in. Yes, exactly. That's it. That's it. Perfect, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Perfect. This is what we want. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to actually use a simple startup pipeline. So it is going to have simple steps. It has two steps, which says echo and Ubuntu. It's going to run it on Ubuntu latest. So I'm going to actually save and run this. So it is going to add a simple pipeline into the file. So it's basically, if you notice, in Azure DevOps, it has created a Azure CI file or the pipeline as code file, and it ran the build on it. It is going to run the steps what is defined in this particular Azure pipelines.yml. So if you look at the content, so basically it is getting queued. So basically this file consists of two steps, which is actually one is scripts where it says hello world, and the second one is says run a multi-line script. It's basically running two-line scripts out here. And display name is explicitly called so that you would know which step has executed, like run one line script and run two-line script. Okay, this is a very simple one. So let me show you a technique of adding multiple tasks into the same pipeline. um, Again, this is a simple way of doing it, but typically we would do it through an IDE where you will try to add the task and raise a PR and get somebody would review it and approve it, and that's how this particular change will be published, and you could use it in the pipeline. And you could also define when you're running the pipeline, you can define which context you would like to create use the pipeline as code or even the source code. When you click on this run pipeline, it will show you which branch would you like to use. Okay, now moving on to the next part. So there'll be a small button here called a show assistant. It's very important and good to know how it works. So here you will see a lot of actually tasks which are built by Azure DevOps and supported, which would you could use it in order to run your pipeline steps, such as building an application or deploying an application, etc. For example, if I have to talk in terms of .NET, I can use a .NET Core job and I can say what we would like to do. Like, do I want to build it, or do I want to restore the packages, or do I want to run some test or any other commands? And I can pass all the arguments. So let me just take a simple one. Probably I'll take a PowerShell. So I'm going to pick that. I'm going. There are a couple of ways. One is I can straight away say on my repo what is the path from which I can get that particular script, or the PowerShell script which is out there, and you can pass arguments into it, or you can even use a inline script. And here is the magic. What I like, and you can even add certain variables or any other configuration related to the pipeline, and you can even say ignore errors, or you could even say you can add some more options around here. And then on stop action, you can even say continue, silently continue, and you can click on add. So it basically is going to create the pipeline as code steps outright. If you are fairly new to Azure DevOps, I would strongly suggest you to use this and start generating the pipeline. So you it will be very, very beneficial for you. So I'm going to straight away save it. It's again, although I'm editing the pipeline out here, so it is going to create the versioned file straight away into my Git, Azure repo. All the changes which I made would be out here, and you could see it. So this is how you will be able to even see the history of the changes that has been made. Okay, just a disclaimer here. So you would never do this directly. So it will always be a PR. And I'm just, for the interest of time, I'm actually making directly changes to the main branches. Okay. Now, as I've already made the changes, since there was a trigger, so what would it would do is it will straight away go ahead and build the job. So here is the second job which just ran, and you will see there will be a third job or the task in which has been executed out here. If I click on the job, you will see a PowerShell step has executed, and it has displayed the echo word, echo hello world, or the right host hello world out here. Okay, this is how a simple pipeline can be created. So now let's look at the stages and jobs. So stage is actually a collection of one or more jobs, and it basically the top structure which you would create it in a pipeline as code. So you can have multiple stages. These stages can be like build stage, test stage, deploy stage, etc., or it could be that CI stage and CD stage, etc. So you could actually pick and choose how would you want to classify or organize your end-to-end pipeline tasks. So stages can have conditions. You can say that, okay, I want to run this stage if and only if the branch is development. Sometimes you do not want to run some stages on a main branch. Maybe you want to run specific stage if and only if it is main branch. So in such cases, you can actually add that. You could also introduce human approvals in case if it is required. And you can have one or more than one jobs in a stage, and basically jobs are a collection of tasks grouped together. And remember that stages will run in sequence as well as job, and you could also configure that to run that in parallel as well. So is in jobs. In each stage, you can run jobs either in sequence or in jobs based on how would you write the dependencies. Unless otherwise you have not defined the dependency, it would run always in parallel. Here is a structure how it looks like. I have stage A, stage B, and in each stage you could have one or more than one job, and that job would consist of multiple steps or tasks that you would like to execute. Okay. So let's look at a simple multi-stage pipeline. In the interest of time, I have a repo where I've already pre-staged all the steps so that I don't have to type it up. So I'm going to just pull up that pipeline. Yeah. So here is a simple demo. I'm going to create a new file straight away here. I'll say single stage. So now you may notice that I'm using a different file. This is not Azure Pipelines YML. So what I could clearly highlight here is that it is not necessary that your pipeline as code should be should be it should be named as Azure Pipelines.yml. It can be anything as long as you are configuring the pipeline. It should be all good. So let's say um, now I create a new pipeline, and here I define that okay, I already have a pipeline as code. So I'm going to select my source code. Where is it, or where do I want to version it in case if I'm updating? So once it's being picked, I'll say existing pipelines. This is how you could actually handpick an existing pipeline as code. So I'm going to point that okay, here is my pipeline, and I'll just go ahead and continue, and I'm going to save it. Unfortunately, by design, the pipeline always picks the name of the repository or the project. So in order to make this separate, so I'm going to edit it. I'm sorry, here itself you have an option. Come on, Mike, I should have, this is quite slow today for some reason. Yeah, and also you may notice that our first pipeline which we have created is already um, running as we have just made a pipeline change. So rename, I'm going to rename this pipeline. Okay, so I'm going to make this as a single stage demo. So I'm going to run this pipeline. And here is a check button which says enable system diagnostics. This will give you an extended view of how your steps, the stages are running. It is like you're running your application in debug mode. You can see that there are two jobs, job A and job B, and both would be running. So let's look at the repo here and see what is the code is written out there. You can see that it has one single stage called as publish, and under that you have a jobs section under which two arrays have been array of jobs have defined. Job A is actually outputting something, and job B is actually is another job which actually depends on job A, where it is saying that don't run job B unless job A has completed successfully. And there is also a way you could even say when the status is failed, you could also run a specific job if needed. You will have a situation that okay, if the deployment fails, you may want to fall back or you may want to take some steps. You can actually define a separate job for it. That's totally possible. Okay, so as the pipeline is running, it's waiting. See, it was waiting till job A to complete. Now job B is completing as well. Now, agents. So it's basically an agent. Basically, it runs the job. So there are basically two types of agents available, which are Microsoft Host Agent and also the second one is self-hosted agents. So Microsoft hosted agent always belongs to an agent pool called as um, a default or Azure pipelines. So here what will happen is that it will have a set of agents which will be allocated to you depending on the configuration or the purchase that your organization have made. You could run one or more than one jobs in a given agent, or there will be certain set of agents which will be available to queue your jobs. And it's Microsoft who completely own it, and you can't even access the agent machines if you need it. So that basically implies you need to install all the softwares and the tools on this no Azure hosted pipelines as part of your build execution or the task execution. You will have to have a task to install Azure, like say .NET specific version, or you want to use a specific command line utility. You have to get that configured before you execute them. But most of the pipe jobs, the tools are available out of the box from the Azure itself. For example, Azure DevOps with Docker tasks. So if you look at it, their documentation clearly calls out how to use this. So anything related to Docker, you could actually run this through this Docker task. And they also have different versions depending on the use case that you got, and they're consistently updating them and managing them. And you could define how you would want to use them. Even they have task for Docker Compose on how to use Docker Compose in case if you want to build a whole bunch of containers using Docker Compose build, or like you want to run them as Docker Compose run and test them, and then you do a Docker, then you could use Docker Compose publish to publish all the images to the repository. You could actually do it through this specific task. Here is the example. So here they're running it's a simple task where they're running the action called as run services, and basically you're pointing providing all the inputs that is required to run them. Let's say here is an example. Let's take the simple Docker one itself. So here is the example. So here you have multiple tasks. So one of the task is to log into the ACR. Second one is to build and publish the task. So the command itself is build and publish, and you are adding the tags how it needs to be tagged after it is being built. Okay, so now let's move on to the next topic, which is workspace. Workspace is basically a directory where your pipeline checks out all the codes to run your pipeline or the set of instructions. So it's actually visible with a variable called as pipeline.workspace. It will be an environment variable. uh, you could also have your own variables that is being defined and run. So you could, this will be helpful in case if you want to pass certain values and execute them. So I'll show you a quick demo of both variables and runtime variables. Before to that, there is also something called as predefined variables. This is basically the variables which are uh, provided or offered for various purposes in Azure DevOps. For example, system.access.token is more or less like your personal access token to the repo. So this is generic, not entitled to an user. You can grant permission as you like for that, and you can use them to check out the code or even push the code back into the repo, etc. in the pipeline. And system.debug is basically enabling the debug. Um, and build number, build reason, these and all actually get populated and you cannot change them. Most of these predefined variables are read only, except few of them which you could override. So let's use using variables and runtime variables. I've already done that. This is what the variable demo was. So let me actually create another uh, pipeline variable .yaml. I'm going to just copy my code into that. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, there are a few more techniques I would like to highlight here, where I'm saying that every branch which starts with either main or releases, or if it's a main branch or release branches, I want to trigger a build every time a change has been made. And you could also mention every time I've made changes to docs directory should trigger a build. And if I made changes to readme file, I don't want to trigger a build. So you could control how you would like to create a build, trigger a build, or exclude a build. You could also use an exclude here and say that I don't want to run build on, say, testing. Anything under testing branch, I don't want to use, or anything starting with testing, I don't want to run a build on it. You could actually set it up. And here are the way. One is group variable, where you could say how you would like to create the group variable. So group variable, group variable is basically you can set up a variable group. For example, let's say I'll create a demo where group, and I'm going to create two values. One is token and user. I'll mention it as Naveen, and this is a simple variable. So I use a variable called as token, and I'll say, so I'll actually have some sensitive value. You could actually, if it is a sensitive value, you can actually mark that as secret. So now, you cannot even read them. Once you have marked it as secret, I'm going to save this. So in order to use that specific, one moment. So I'm going to just change few things here. I'm going to actually just print the usernames and also the map token. And also let's print one more variable, which is from here. Let's say, um, okay. So I'm going to even print it, the project name. So here is how I'm going to use. So there are different kind of variables. One is variable group. I'm saying that, okay, get all the variables from this variable group. And other two variables are basically DevOps account and project name. And either you could straight away use it as it's been defined at the global level. And these variables can also be defined in stage level and also the job levels. And in here, what will happen is that, you could also use those token and set up a separate variable if needed. It's basically in order to fetch the secret into a file variable, you can do this way. Let me just go ahead and commit this change. So let me go ahead and create a new variable, existing pipeline. So variable demo. So I just created a, let me just rename it. So I'm going to run this pipeline. Since I'm running it for the first time, it will ask my permission because I have to access a group, variable group. So I'm going to approve that. It says that this particular pipeline need permission since I have elevated access to the Azure DevOps repo. So I can permit that. If you do not have access, you might have to get hold of an Azure DevOps administrator or project administrator who could grant access to you. Okay, and this is how you could actually run the and get the variables and display them. You could see that it is still showing as sensitive data, and it has printed my name, which is coming from variable group. You could also use, sorry about, I made a mistake here, my bad. So I have to use not this way. It's not an environment variable, it's a simple variable. I can use. So you could even use no brackets so that it'll not, in case if you want to render a variable name, you could do this way. So I'm going to make a commit. Since there is a trigger, it will automatically run the pipeline for us. Come on. So hopefully it has run. Come on. Okay, the next topic which I'd like to just walk you through is, so has the change made? Yes. So let me just run it. Yeah, so the next topic is runtime and template parameters. Basically, sometime you may want to actually pass some inputs or use some input values while running the pipelines, which are very dynamic, and you may have to enter it manually, or you could actually invoke the pipeline through API and pass the value into that parameter. You could do it. There is also another some concept called as template variables, where you can create multiple templates, which are reusable templates, which can be used in your project, or also it can be used in other projects as well. There are a couple of ways you could write it, so that you can even have a centralized DevOps repo creating all the templates. You can check out those templates and use them in your pipeline on how the build has to execute, or how the test has to be created. This will help you to easily organize how you would like to access, how do you like to manage the DevOps pipelines and the code changes or the pipeline changes. So here you could see that it's printing my name. um, where it's because I've used specific interpolation. If you go back to the variable field here, you'll see at macro level this is how the variable has to be used, else it won't actually print it. Okay, so now going back to the moving on to the next demo, which is actually to create a parameter based pipeline. So let me just pull up my parameter file. So I'm going to run a simple parameter pipeline. I used a double L. I'm going to cancel it. Okay. Hope my screen is visible and I'm there is no interruption in my connection, right?
Yes, sir, it's clearly visible.
So here you can see the trigger is none. Basically, I'm saying that I don't want this pipeline to trigger automatically. You could see that every commit which I made, my the first pipeline which I created is triggering all the while, because every time I make a commit to the main branch, it is actually running the pipeline for me. Oops, okay, I used the wrong source code. Pipeline existing parameters. Oops, it's taking a while. Just a moment, guys. Hang in there. Okay, do we have any questions? Let's just look at that real quick.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir,
you
we
do
have.
not need any.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
No, no, sir, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
do we know? Yeah, yeah. So let's go through the pipelines which I've created.
Sir, in our Discord community, because this is hosting in this session is
So I'm
being
going to
hosted in
rename.
multiple places. So there are some questions, and I'm putting all these questions to your
Mm-hmm,
screen now. If you can address these, there is a question by Satvik.
mm-hmm,
So it means, are there any differences or
mm-hmm.
consideration when migrating from classic UI based pipeline to YAML pipelines in Azure DevOps? Like maybe he's asking, is there a difference between classic UI based pipelines and YAML pipelines?
Okay, so there is not much difference because your classic pipeline is itself is in backend they're actually creating a YAML based structure for you, and they're storing it. But the advantage of using YAML based pipeline is that it can be templatized, it can be used across different projects and across different repos, which will help you to streamline how you would like to uh, you know uh, run your how you would like to manage your DevOps pipelines. Yeah, Here is the parameter. You could see that I have written a parameters called as what pool image which you'd like to use. And I'm saying that I have option of you running that in a Mac OS, Ubuntu, or Windows, and I'm passing that parameter value out here in an interpolation way where I am using dollar, double flag bracket, and then I'll use parameter dot the value which I'm actually going to use, which is image, or sorry, the parameter name. So when I'm trying to run it, it is asking me how do I like to run it. And also there is a way, do you want to run the test as a boolean or this one, you will have a check button. You can just select that and run it. And here you could also use a if condition. It is being written whether you would like to run this step or not, or whether you would like to execute a step or a task in a job. This all can be controlled based on the parameters which is being passed, or it will apply even for any variables as well. Okay, now you could also publish the artifacts which will help you to uh, you know uh, which will help you to store the compiled applications. And also this can be used by other pipelines to check out or pull that while deploying it to another, like let's say your build pipeline is publishing the compiled binary, and release pipeline is actually collecting it and using that for deployment. You could use something called as secure files, which is where you will be able to store some sensitive data that you would be using in your pipeline, either to publish or either to access any remote systems or services, etc. Some of the examples are like signing certificates, or provisioning profiles, SSH keys, cube ADM, cube config file, etc. uh, there is a limit of secure file which will be only 10 MB, and there is a specific task in your pipeline that you could use to run. So if you see secure, so it will say download a secure file. This basically download the secure file what you have defined. So basically you will upload that secure file to Azure DevOps under library in the section called as secure files. And once you upload it, you can't download it. It is just stored securely in there, and you'll just provide a name for that. So you have to just drag a file in there and give a name for it, and that name you have to just use it out here. And this file would not be accessible to anyone, and it will be deleted while the job is completed. That's how you could safeguard your application. And also another ways, in your group variable itself, you can create a group uh, variable where it can be linked to fetch the the secrets from your Azure Key Vault. This will make sure that you're not only safeguarding your sensitive information or the values, but also you'll have a method of accessing those secrets as you need it. Okay. um, so with that, I'm going to use a different technique this now, Azure DevOps project generator. So this is actually a good place where, in case if you want to practice, where you will get some projects which you could just straight away use that for practicing or learning purpose. So I'm going to actually choose a template which is YAML based parts unlimited, and I'm going to push it to my I'm going to publish it there. It is actually basically publishing that template into my organization, and the project name is parts unlimited. So it's copying that. Bear with me for a moment. So in the meantime, we'll move on to environments and gated approvals. So you could create environments so that you could track and trace how the deployment can be done. There are three types majorly. One is none. It's only meant for setting up gated approvals in case if you are deploying it uh, to an external services, say even Azure Cloud or any other cloud platforms, or even on-premises setup, or even if you're publishing something towards the SaaS platform or any other external PaaS platform, you can use that. Or there are two more options. One is actually VM, where you can set up an environment agent on the Azure on the remote machine where you are hosted your application, you can leverage the local binaries or some environment values of the intended environment and get the application deployed out there. Um, and there is also another approach which is Kubernetes, where you have to set up your Kubernetes cluster so that you can define how you would like to deploy it to which namespace, etc. Release pipeline basically helps you to deliver the software. You could even have multiple stages and tasks. There is also some configuration around the release pipeline, such as instead of stages, you'll be using deployment, and you'll define how the deployment strategy should be, like only deploy once, etc. This would kind of help you to prevent somebody is redeploying the application once again. um, I think the project is getting created. In the meantime, I can take some questions. uh, can you share any other questions? Probably I'll try to address them while I set up end-to-end setup here.
Yes, sir. There
Yeah,
is
here is where I'm going to
some
create an
beginners.
environment.
Yes, sir. There are some
I'm going
questions
to
that
set up
might
a
be very
dummy
beginner
environment.
friendly. Yes, sir. So the question is, are
I'm sorry,
these
your voice is breaking.
okay? I'm sorry. The question is, are these YAML pipelines reusable?
Can we look at them here? Probably. Just a moment. Let me stop sharing my screen. Probably I'll take all the questions. Yeah, is YAML is similar to JSON? Yes. In fact, there you can convert JSON files into YAML. Basically, JSON is more machine friendly, whereas YAML is human friendly because you can easily read them. The way it is being structured. Um, Again, you can definitely reuse the pipelines. I, since in the interest of time, I have not shown how to templatize them, but I'll quickly show in my test repo which I had prepared on the side. Um, and any other questions? Do you guys have some resource to learn YAML? Uh, okay, so I think this project generator also has some projects where you could write. There is also DevOps pipeline learning. There is a portal where you could actually learn some of the DevOps uh, pipelines, like how do you create, Azure DevOps Labs. So let me share this, stick that in the chat. You could use this for learning how would you actually use the Azure DevOps. Um, can you share it with everyone, please? I don't have a way to. So you could use this, which is, let me share my screen once again. Um, so here is the page where you have options where you'll see all kind of um, features of Azure DevOps and how you could utilize them effectively. Okay, so yeah, my project has been copied, or I just created a new project. So this already has a pipeline which is basically running DevOps. Sorry, the .NET. It's a .NET project. So basically, it is compiling, building, and publishing the artifacts. That's what you are able to see here. Let me just public. Is this a public project? Let me see that. Project setting is private. Let me just change it to public. All right. So I'm going to switch back. I'm sharing with you. I'll be sharing the pipeline. So now I can straight away run a pipeline for this. And there is a pre-stage pipeline for it. I'm going to just run it. Let it run. So while this is running, I'm going to actually set up a CD pipeline because this is a simple CI pipeline. At end of this pipeline, it is generating an artifact and publishing it. So now let's go ahead and create a CD pipeline. Anyways, I have already created it and tested it. So I'm going to open my parts unlimited, which I tested. So I'm going to create a Okay. So I have the step. So I have two steps here. One is deploy web. I'll mention that as dev. Another one is deploy web. Um, so I'll have to use underscore because you can't use hyphen here. So I'll say demo environment. The development. So this is, yeah. So here are, and you can see that we are mentioning how it has to be deployed, and also I'm mentioning on which environment. And let me go ahead and create an environment called as demo environment under pipelines and environments. So if you have not created the pipeline, it is going to create it. Okay. So now I'm going to create an environment and I'll mark that as none. And I'm going to set up a condition saying like this needs to be approved by someone. In my case, it's just me. And also in advance, I'll say I should be able to approve myself. So I've added this. So let me just go ahead and create the pipeline now. See, now I made a commit to master branch. Now you can see that there is a build trigger for master branch. What will happen here is now your master branch, I need to create the pipeline, sorry. Existing, oops. So I'll rename the SCD. So now if I see, I have two pipelines. One is parts unlimited and parts unlimited CD. Okay, now if you see the parts unlimited, so this is the first run which it ran, and it ran the entire CH builds, which is CH steps like building, copying, and publishing. And if you click on the build number, see this part unlimited is a pipeline name, and this is a specific build. And if you see, there is an option called as published with the small box icon, and here you will see the compiled binary. This has been generated because, and the name, even this name which is drop, is coming from this particular step. Here it has been defined how it has to be created and from where, and it will pick it up from there and get that published. You could even provide some more inputs like what should be the name of the build and from which location you want to collect the files, etc. Okay. And here, they are basically copying the file from your source directory to target directory, anything with JSON structure. And they're just straight away publishing it. And also they're pushing few no artifacts into this artifact directory. You might be wondering, where is this coming from? This is where I was explaining predefined variables in Azure DevOps. So it's basically some of the variables which you could use like system access token, etc. And also they have a huge set of variables that you could use at build phase, and which includes your build artifact directory. It will be a specific directory out there, staging directory, which will be like /a. Um, so let's see if our pipeline has triggered and ran. Come on. So it has already triggered and it is waiting because I have to grant some permissions because this is the first time. Let me go ahead and grant the permission to it. I need to grant permissions. So it is starting, and this is the deploy underscore demo is where I've added a gated approval so that it will only be deployed if and only if, although there is a sequence here, deploy demo will only be deployed if somebody approves it. Uh, yeah, it has been deployed here, and now you can see that it needs, first of all, it needs to be up, needs permission, then it will ask for Jackson. Okay. Okay, and now it'll ask me how would you like to deploy this. This is the gated approval. So let's just rerun this once again, just for to show how CI/CD would kick in. Okay, let's say I make a slight change here. Um, okay, right away publishing this. Now what will happen is your CI pipeline will get started first, and it will trigger and run on this specific commit which I just made. If you see, I just added an additional text here. Once that CI pipeline is completed, then your CD pipeline will get triggered. Okay. Um, while this is running, let me just show you another example of templating. I think somebody. Um, so here is a template. So here is an example where you are calling a template, saying like, okay, I have my template under templates directory called a simple params, which will will be expecting a specific parameters into it, and also some default values being defined. You could also have some conditional templates. Here you can see there's a little slightly complex one. I have a conditional based on the parameter which I pass to the pipeline, display fluid color yes or no. It will decide which template to be executed here. If it is true, one template will get executed. If it is false, and you can see that it is if not and if equal to is being used. This specific technique is actually comes from your YAML syntaxing. Okay, let me go ahead and run it and show you how does that look. So conditional. So I'm going to run this pipeline now. Yeah, give me some time, guys. I'll try to publish this into our workshop repo so that you could also use them or refer them as you like. So, so when this is running, so it is going to actually display the data. It's basically going to refer these template steps. Here, if you look at the fruits, it's basically printing the fruit and it is looping through it. Basically, it's a object each, and there is a array in each of them. So it's basically going to repeat multiple times to display the fruit name and the color of it. So if you look at the build, it has completed successfully already, and you can see it has ran multiple times. So banana red and also banana yellow, apple red and apple green. So these are all being passed as inputs to that particular template here in template conditional. You can see that, and I'm just invoking this specific template to execute. In this particular template, I'm basically looping through the inputs and printing the color and the fruit name. Okay, so going back to our CI/CD pipeline, let's look at this. So here is our part unlimited, and it is waiting for to be, although it has deployed successfully to the development environment, for demo environment, it is waiting for an approval. Here is how you could actually achieve a gated approval into the pipeline. Yeah, with this, I think in the interest of time, we can conclude. There are a lot many things in Azure DevOps pipeline. I would strongly suggest you guys to go through this documentation. And please bear in mind that you have to use the specific type of Azure DevOps. In case if you have on-premises Azure DevOps server, you may have to toggle and pick the specific version, else you may get actually runs and you may get run into some issues which are not oriented for a specific platform. Yeah, with this, I think I would conclude, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to take those questions and answer them.
Yes, sir. Looks like there are no questions in the comment section now. Though, let me just quickly share. Sir, if you could, I request if you could share your LinkedIn ID in the comment section because one person is
Yep.
asking for the same.
So, Lakshit, I think I'll be done. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, sir. So people are asking for, okay, there is one question, use of gates. I'm not sure what Srikanth is
So
really wants.
gated approval will come in. Yeah, so gated approval is required in many places. For example, you may have a release manager who would like to approve your deployment. You don't want your production code to get deployed automatically, right? Somebody has to be there to approve it before it get deployed to an environment. Or maybe you may want to publish or complete the CI build if and only after you have done some functional testing or checks. Or even you can use automated gated approval. I mean, it's basically a way to check whether you are adhering to some of the organizational standards, like your has your sonar cube code quality percentages beyond 80%, or is there any vulnerabilities in the container that is being built in the pipeline. If you have a high or critical vulnerability, you may want to fail the build. And this is it's just a step and a concept called as gated approval. Manual approval is where I just showed you how you could actually introduce that in the pipeline and get that you can utilize them for various purposes. Even if you don't have an environment to deploy to, you can use that environment property to ensure somebody reviews and approves it or declines it.
Yeah, and if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop every question in the comment section, guys. And we have already shared all the links that Naveen Shah has shared. So you can see all these links are here. So using these links, you can check out the Azure DevOps portal, and you can build your pipeline. And also this we this part this record the recording will always be on YouTube. So if you are stuck at somewhere, you can definitely go to YouTube, check out the entire recording. Wherever you're stuck, you can just use it, or rewatch it again and again about this video. And also, I would request Naveen sir if you could share your social profile so that people could join.
Sure. uh, I have a LinkedIn, and also I think that's the only one is better, right? Yes. Just a moment.
Maybe just can you please check, sir? I have shared already, if this is the right link or not.
I'm just waiting for the chat. Yeah, that's correct. It is mine. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So those who are asking about for the Naveen sir's profile, you can just connect with him on LinkedIn. I have already shared the LinkedIn profile in the comment section, guys. So thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you Naveen sir for being here and explaining so explicitly about all the topics that you have covered in the YAML and all the pipelines, radial pipelines, and everything. It was a really insightful session, and even I have learned a lots of things from the session too, sir. And hoping to host you in future sessions as well. We are doing lots of initiatives, hoping to get your support in future events, sir. And thank you everyone for joining in. Have a nice evening, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you.
and it's my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Cheers, guys.
Bye.